In the early 1980s, from about the period of 1981 to 1984, there were 7 Connecticut women and 1 New York woman that were murdered, and all but one of them had been raped, and they didn't know who did it. And this murderer didn't stop with these single girls. At one point, he raped and murdered 2 girls who were only 14 years old. Well, at the time, I was a young mother, and one of the things that I liked to do to honor my mother was to bring her something that she cherished very much, and that was fresh eggs. She lived in the city in Providence, and so I would drive back and forth from my home down Route 6, and I'd get to Brooklyn, and I would buy fresh eggs from the farm. And I had met the family. I had bought eggs there for a number of years at that point. Almost a decade. And I had a young daughter of my own, and then I had a second one. And the trauma that I felt at the time, I just hoped that those young girls that were being brutally murdered wasn't going to come up as far as my town. It was terrifying, ladies and gentlemen. A serial murderer is like nothing else you can explain, because there's such fear that goes along with mystery, which goes along with how appalled you are, how repulsed you are when you find out what's happened. So I remember exactly to the day, to the hour, when they said it was Michael Ross, a fairly young man that I had been buying eggs from. And it gave me chills, and in a moment I'll probably have them going straight down my arms again. And I thought I would never hear of a crime that was as horrid as that. And I was elected here, so I've had the other experiences, as Representative Cafaro has said, to vote on the death penalty in the past. And in my conscience, I could not repeal the death penalty. I followed the Michael Ross case very closely, and it came home again a second time when my husband was working for the state police, and he was flying Trooper 1, and he was brought in because it was going to be time for Michael to be executed. It didn't happen on January 26th. It was delayed. The year was 2005, and he was to be on patrol that night in the helicopter when Michael Ross was to be executed. He would be in the helicopter. He would be flying over the prison. It wasn't until May 13th, 2005, that Michael Ross was executed. You never know how you're going to react to something like that. And I remember very clearly to this day, again, that the following day I felt a moment of peace, because it was over. A moment of peace. I never thought that I would hear of another crime that was so heinous. And to my horror, when I read the paper and heard the news of what happened in Cheshire, it gave me such a fear. A young family. It happened to be 2 girls again. A mother, a father. Unspeakable crimes that we've all I think felt to our core was the worst that we have ever heard. At that point, I knew that I would never vote to repeal the death penalty. I can't imagine in my heart that I can look forward and say that there will be never again anything so horrible as those 2 would happen in this small state. They made national and international news. They were so horrible. I pray, though, that it doesn't happen. But I cannot support repealing the death penalty. I looked at this legislation and I listened very closely to the debate and watched the amendments in the Senate last week on Wednesday. And as a legislator with now almost 20 years of experience, I can tell you that my first impression was, this is some of the messiest legislation I've ever seen. Messy. It didn't answer a lot of questions. It left so many things open and hanging. So now we're going to leave some people on death row, but everybody else forward's not going to be on death row. They're going to have special circumstances. And oh, by the way, the warden can move them around, and they're going to be moved every 90 days. Really? No. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't support that, and I won't. I know that most of you came in here with your minds made up. We sit as brothers and sisters in this chamber and we all vote partially on what we know from our experiences. We vote what we know from when we've talked to our constituents. So I take those two pieces very seriously. I have taken very to heart and spoken to religious people in my life about my experiences in this case. So personally, I have my own comfort level with where I am, but I've also in the past polled my district, and that too has said to me that it is the right vote to vote against repeal of the death penalty. Thank you, Madam Speaker.